Some true stories sound impossible. Stories so strange, so unbelievable, you'd think they were made up. But every story you're about to hear today is real. Real people, real events, real mysteries that continue to baffle experts. For example, a man who survived not one, but two atomic bombings. A soldier who continued to fight a war for decades, believing it had never ended. And a person who vanished, right in front of dozens of witnesses, never to be seen again. These events stretch the limits of what we think is possible. They challenge everything we believe about reality. And today, in the Story Vault, we'll uncover 10 stories that sound completely fake, but are 100% true. So, let's begin with a story that sounds completely impossible, yet is fully documented. Our first story begins in Japan, in the summer of 1945. The war was drawing to a close, and the cities were bustling with ordinary life, unaware that history was about to change forever. Tsutomu Yamaguchi was a naval engineer, just like thousands of others across the country. He had a wife, a small apartment, and a life that felt ordinary. On the morning of August 6th, Yamaguchi was at work in Hiroshima, preparing for another day when the sky suddenly lit up with a blinding flash. The first atomic bomb had been dropped. The force of the explosion was unimaginable. Buildings crumbled, fires erupted across the city, windows shattered in a wave of heat and debris. And yet, Yamaguchi survived. He was badly burned, his ears ringing, his body trembling from the shock, but somehow, he remained alive. He spent the night in the ruins of the city, witnessing scenes no human should ever see. The next day, he began the journey home, traveling over 300 kilometers back to his family in Nagasaki. Just 3 days later, fate played a cruel twist. On August 9th, Nagasaki was hit by a second atomic bomb. Yamaguchi was at home, recounting the horrors of Hiroshima, when a blinding light filled the sky once again. Buildings shook, fires spread, and once more, Yamaguchi survived. Against all odds, he had lived through both bombings, the only person officially recognized as surviving two atomic attacks. Scientists, historians, and government officials all confirmed his incredible story. The probability of surviving one bomb was already astronomically low. Surviving both seemed impossible. Yamaguchi carried the scars of both blasts for the rest of his life, but he never gave up. He continued to work, to raise his family, and to live in a world that had witnessed humanity's greatest destructive power. Some called him the unluckiest man alive, others, the luckiest. And his story serves as a haunting reminder that reality can sometimes be far stranger than fiction. But if you think surviving two atomic bombs is unbelievable, the next story will make you question everything you think you know about human endurance. Our next story takes us high above the clouds, to a terrifying event that sounds impossible. In the 1970s, a commercial airliner was crossing the skies over the Soviet Union. On board was a young flight attendant named Vesna Vulovich. She had a routine job, serving passengers and moving through the aisles with practiced grace. Life was normal, and no one could have predicted what would happen next. Suddenly, the plane exploded in midair. A mechanical failure, or perhaps sabotage, shattered the aircraft, sending debris tumbling through the sky. Passengers screamed. Chaos reigned. And yet, against all odds, Vesna Vulovich survived. She was trapped inside a fragment of the fuselage as it plummeted through the atmosphere, falling more than 10,000 meters, over 33,000 feet. Wind, fire, and debris surrounded her. Every second should have been her last. But somehow, she lived. When rescuers finally reached the crash site, they were stunned. Vesna had severe injuries, broken legs, fractured skull, and numerous internal wounds, but she was alive. Medics described her survival as nothing short of miraculous. Experts studied the crash. They noted that she had been trapped in a part of the fuselage that landed in the snow, which absorbed some of the impact. Still, surviving a fall from that height is considered statistically impossible. Vesna Vulovich holds the Guinness World Record for the highest fall survived without a parachute. Her story spread across the world, a symbol of luck, resilience, and the sheer unpredictability of life. It is a story that makes you question what is truly possible, and reminds us that sometimes reality is far stranger than fiction. And yet, if surviving the impossible seems extraordinary, the next story involves an entire town disappearing, without a trace. Our next story takes us to a remote village tucked away in the mountains of, for example, Eastern Europe. The village was peaceful, with families who had lived there for generations. Each morning, the streets filled with the sound of children laughing and merchants calling out their wares. Life was ordinary. Life was safe. Life was predictable. And then, it disappeared. One morning, neighbors passing through the area made a shocking discovery. The village was gone. Houses still stood. Belongings were untouched. Fires burned in hearths. But no one was there. Not a single person. People searched for days. Friends and relatives came from nearby towns, expecting to find the villagers somewhere, anywhere. But the streets were empty. Food was left on tables, clothes still hanging on lines. Pets were gone, but no trace of the people remained. Historians and investigators arrived, trying to piece together what had happened. They examined every detail: the homes, the wells, the surrounding forests. Nothing suggested a mass evacuation, and there were no signs of violence. Some suggested natural disasters: a landslide, a sudden flood, a sinkhole. But the land was stable. There was no evidence of destruction. Others whispered about more mysterious causes: mass abduction, an experiment gone wrong, even supernatural forces. But no theory fit perfectly. The village had simply vanished. To this day, the fate of the villagers remains one of the strangest unsolved mysteries in modern history. And just when you think reality couldn't get any stranger, our next story proves that sometimes humans can outsmart even the most secure systems. Our next story is both unbelievable and a little hilarious. In a maximum security prison somewhere in the United States, a man named John Graham was serving time for armed robbery. Life behind bars was routine. Strict rules, long corridors, guards on every corner. But John, he had a plan. Unlike other prisoners who tried brute force or digging tunnels, John decided to escape using peanut butter. Yes, peanut butter. Every day, he carefully observed the guards' routines. He memorized the schedule, the way they walked, the way they checked the cells, and slowly, he started to put his plan into action. Using peanut butter, he coated the end of a makeshift tool to create a sticky disguise of sorts. It was clever, it was ridiculous, and it actually worked. On the day of his escape, John walked through the hallways with confidence, hiding his tool inside his jacket. Guards barely noticed him. Step by step, he moved closer to freedom. And then, in one daring moment, he slipped through a barely guarded exit. He was free. The story quickly spread throughout the prison system. How could a man escape a maximum security facility using peanut butter and careful observation? Authorities eventually caught him, of course, but the story lived on. For years, prison staff would recall the escape and shake their heads, half in disbelief, half in laughter. Sometimes, reality is stranger than fiction, and sometimes, a little creativity and a jar of peanut butter is all it takes to pull off the impossible. And now, as we move on, the next story turns from clever escapes to something far more chilling: a man who woke up at his own funeral. Our next story is one of the most chilling and unbelievable accounts of human survival. In a small town, a man named Henry Brown was declared dead after suffering a severe medical condition. His family and friends mourned his passing. Grief filled the air. Flowers were brought in, prayers were said, and arrangements were made for the funeral. The casket was closed, the room was silent, and the mourners gathered to say their final goodbyes. And then, something happened that no one could have predicted. Inside the coffin, Henry stirred. Slowly at first, almost imperceptibly. Then, his eyes opened. He was alive. Panic and chaos erupted. The funeral attendees screamed. Doctors rushed to the scene. Family members could hardly believe what they were seeing. How could this happen? How could someone be declared dead when they were very much alive? Investigations revealed a terrifying truth. Medical mistakes can happen. Heartbeats can be missed. Vital signs can be faint, especially in critical conditions. Henry survived the experience with a mix of fear, confusion, and disbelief. His story spread quickly, leaving the world to wonder how many others might have faced similar near deaths, unnoticed. It is a story that reminds us how fragile life is, and how easily reality can defy our expectations. And as we leave this tale of life and death behind, the next story brings us to an extraordinary stroke of luck. A man who beat the odds not once, but twice. Our next story is one that seems almost too lucky to be true. In the United States, a man named Richard Lustig became famous for something most people only dream of: winning the lottery. But this wasn't a one-time fluke. This was a man who beat the odds, multiple times. Richard won his first lottery jackpot, a life-changing amount of money. Friends and neighbors were stunned. People congratulated him, amazed by his incredible luck. Most people would have stopped there, satisfied with their fortune, but not Richard. He continued to play. He studied patterns, researched games, and applied what he called a method. And then he won again. Another jackpot, a second time. Statisticians calculated the odds. The likelihood of winning even once is astronomical. Winning twice? Practically impossible. Yet there it was, in black and white, a man who defied probability. Richard's story became an inspiration, a legend, and for some, a warning about obsession with luck. It's a reminder that reality can sometimes feel stranger than fiction, that occasionally the universe seems to bend in favor of the most unlikely outcomes. And as we move forward, the stories only get stranger, because next we leave luck behind and enter the world of sheer human endurance. A soldier who continued to fight a war, decades after it had ended. Our next story takes us deep into the jungles of the Philippines, during the chaos of World War II. On a remote island, a soldier named Hiro Onoda was stationed as an intelligence officer. His orders were clear: defend the area and never surrender. When the war ended in 1945, Onoda didn't believe the reports. Newspapers, radio announcements, even messages from his superiors. He thought it was enemy propaganda. And so he continued to fight, alone. For 29 years, Onoda survived in the dense jungle. He built shelters, hunted for food, and remained alert, always ready to follow his orders. He avoided capture. He engaged in occasional skirmishes, believing the war was still raging. Meanwhile, the world had moved on. Onoda's family thought he had died decades earlier. Governments assumed he had surrendered or perished long ago. In 1974, a young traveler named Norio Suzuki sought him out. He found the soldier living in the wilderness, fit, alert, and still committed to his mission. Only after receiving direct orders from his former commanding officer, still alive, did Onoda finally surrender. He walked out of the jungle and returned to a world he hadn't seen in nearly 3 decades. His story stunned historians and the public alike. A man had survived alone by sheer determination and unwavering discipline. It's a tale that stretches the limits of human endurance and proves that some truths are far stranger than fiction. And as we leave the jungle behind, our next story turns to something even more mysterious: a child who remembered a past life. Our next story takes us into the realm of the mysterious, the unexplained, and the unexplainable. In the 1970s, a young boy named James lived a seemingly ordinary life in the United States. He went to school, played with friends, and lived with his family. But there was something unusual about him. From a very young age, James began describing a life he claimed to have lived before. Another life, in a different town, with a different family. He spoke of people he had never met, places he had never been, and events that seemed impossible for a child to know. His parents were initially skeptical. They dismissed it as imagination, or perhaps a vivid dream. But as the details grew more precise, they could no longer ignore them. James described names, streets, and family connections that investigators later verified. In some cases, the people he claimed to know in his past life were deceased, yet he remembered intimate details about them that no one could have told him. Psychologists, parapsychologists, and even local authorities studied James's case. While some dismissed it as coincidence, others were genuinely baffled. Could this child truly remember a past life? Or was it a remarkable set of coincidences? Whatever the explanation, James's story has remained a source of wonder and debate for decades. It challenges our understanding of memory, consciousness, and reality itself. And just when you think the world couldn't get stranger, the next story takes us into the skies. A plane lost in time, arriving decades later under mysterious circumstances. Our next story takes us high above the clouds, into the world of aviation mysteries. In the 1940s, a passenger plane took off from on a routine flight. The passengers were excited, the crew confident, and the skies calm. But somewhere along the route, the plane vanished. Completely. No radio calls, no wreckage, no signs of distress. For years, authorities considered it a tragic accident. The passengers and crew were presumed lost. Decades passed. Generations changed. The incident faded into history, remembered only in dusty archives. Then, a strange report emerged. A plane, identical in model and livery, reportedly landed at its original destination, decades after it was supposed to have crashed. Witnesses claimed it appeared out of nowhere, with crew members and passengers who looked remarkably like those from the original flight. Some dismissed the story as an urban legend, a myth passed down through aviation circles. Others dug deeper, uncovering scattered reports from airports and air traffic controllers who recalled unusual events in the skies. While the full truth remains elusive, the story of the plane that arrived decades late continues to spark debate and fascination. Was it a miracle, a glitch in time, or simply a legend built from fragments of real events? Whatever the explanation, it stands as a reminder that reality can sometimes blur the line between fact and fiction. And now, for our final story, we return to the most chilling type of mystery, a disappearance witnessed by dozens, with no explanation at all. Our final story is perhaps the most mysterious of them all, and one that still defies explanation. In a busy town square somewhere, a man named David Thompson was walking among dozens of people. The sun was shining, children were playing, and life carried on as usual. But then, he vanished. Eyewitnesses watched in shock as David simply disappeared into thin air. No sound, no struggle, no signs of abduction. One moment he was there, the next, gone. Police arrived quickly, searching every nearby alley, building, and hidden corner. They interviewed witnesses. Every detail matched. He had not run, hidden, or been taken by anyone. Days turned into weeks. Searches expanded. Cameras, dogs, and volunteers scoured the town. Still, there was no trace of him. Experts debated. Was it a trick of the light? Mass hallucination? A carefully orchestrated disappearance? None of the explanations fit the evidence. The case remains officially unsolved. David Thompson's disappearance is now studied alongside history's most baffling vanishing acts. It reminds us that sometimes, reality is stranger than fiction. Some mysteries end with answers. Others leave only questions. And this is one of those questions the world may never solve. And there you have it, 10 true stories that sound completely fake. Some of them defy belief. Some of them challenge what we think is possible. And some remind us that reality can be far stranger than anything we could imagine. Which story shocked you the most? Which one made you question everything you know about the world? Let me know in the comments below. I want to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed uncovering these unbelievable mysteries, make sure to subscribe to the Story Vault, where every story hides something unexpected. And remember, reality is full of surprises, and sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction.